I've always believed you can measure the health of a relationship in the quiet moments. Not the grand gestures or the Instagram-worthy vacations, but the silence between two people sitting on the same couch. Whether that silence feels peaceful or like drowning. Lately, ours felt like drowning. I remember the moment I realized how far gone we were. It was an ordinary Monday night in late October. The heat had kicked on for the first time that season, rattling the vents like old bones. The smell of dust and warm air made the house feel smaller somehow. I'd cooked spaghetti because it was cheap and fast, and because it used to be her favorite. Used to be. We sat across from each other at the little two-person table wedged between the living room and the kitchen. Her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, loose strands hanging over her temples. She wore an oversized sweatshirt that said Nashville in faded letters. She looked tired. But it wasn't just work or errands. It was a different kind of tiredness, the kind that comes from pretending. I watched her spin her fork in her pasta, lifting a few strands but never taking a bite. My own plate was half-eaten. I tried to think of something light to say. A joke, a comment about work, the neighbors' tacky Halloween decorations, anything to snap us out of whatever this was. "So, your boss still calling you on weekends?" I asked, like it was casual. She blinked, slowly, then set her fork down. "Can we not do this right now?" Her voice was soft but edged with exhaustion, like she'd rehearsed the words in her head before speaking them. I swallowed, feeling heat crawl up my neck. "Do what?" "This," she said, waving one hand in a lazy circle between us. "The interrogation. The small talk. Acting like we're. I don't know. Still us." I felt something crack in my chest. Still us. Like we were a brand that had gone out of business. I looked around our kitchen. The walls were pale blue because she'd insisted on that color. "It'll feel like summer even in winter," she'd said. Now it felt cold. I noticed the tiny crack in the ceiling we'd laughed about when we moved in. It looked bigger now. "I'm not trying to interrogate you," I said carefully. "I'm trying to talk." "About what?" She stared at me with eyes that looked older than the woman I married. "About how we pretend everything's fine. About how you're sleeping on the edge of the bed. About how we can't even finish a meal without feeling like strangers." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She wasn't yelling. That was the worst part. She sounded calm, rational, like someone explaining why the company was closing down. She pushed her chair back and stood. "I'm going to bed." "It's only 8:30, I said, as though the clock was an authority on marriage. She paused halfway around the table. "I know." I watched her disappear down the hallway, listened to the quiet click of the bedroom door. I sat there staring at the spaghetti going cold on our plates. And all I could think was how silence used to be our friend. How we'd sit for hours on that couch, not speaking, but feeling completely together. And how now, the silence felt like the ocean floor, pressing down on my chest. I didn't follow her right away. I just sat there, scraping my fork across the plate, feeling ridiculous and alone. I thought about how fast things can change. 2 years ago, we were planning a trip to Italy. We used to argue about how many pairs of shoes to pack. Now we barely spoke. Eventually, I cleaned up, put the leftovers in the fridge, wiped the counters like muscle memory. I felt robotic. Everything felt fragile, like if I moved too fast, the whole house would shatter. When I finally went into the bedroom, the lights were off. I could hear her breathing, slow and steady, like she'd trained herself to fall asleep before I came in. I stood there a moment, watching the shape of her under the blanket. I remembered how she used to sleep curled toward me, one hand resting on my chest. Now she lay curled toward the wall. I undressed quietly and slipped into bed, careful not to touch her. My side felt colder than usual. I stared at the ceiling for hours, counting the shadows from the streetlight outside. I tried not to think about how long it had been since we'd touched each other without flinching. But it's impossible not to think about the distance when the person you love is only inches away but feels miles gone. When the alarm buzzed at 6:15 the next morning, I opened my eyes to gray dawn bleeding through the blinds. She was already out of bed. I could hear the low hum of the shower, water rushing against the tiles. A faint steam drifted under the bathroom door. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to summon the energy to face another day of pretending. I kept thinking how surreal it was that you could share a mortgage, bills, even the same pillowcases, and feel like two strangers renting separate rooms. When she finally came out, her hair was wet and twisted up in a towel. She smelled like lavender soap, the same brand she'd used since college. There was a time when that smell would have made me feel lucky. Now it felt like nostalgia for a life I wasn't sure we'd ever get back. "Morning," I said softly. She glanced at me, eyes guarded. "Hey." She dropped her towel into the hamper and started pulling clothes from her dresser. A blouse, black pants, practical shoes. She'd become practical in every way. Efficient, minimal, like she was conserving energy for something that didn't include me. You working late again tonight? I tried, hating how my voice sounded too casual, too eager. She paused with a shirt in her hands, staring at the fabric. Probably. Depends how things go. Anything I can help with? She let out a small laugh, humorless. Not really. Unless you suddenly learned how to manage corporate accounts and fire half the sales team. I managed a weak smile. Nope. Guess I'll just stick to fixing the garbage disposal. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a split second, there was softness. The ghost of the woman who used to giggle when I made stupid jokes. But it vanished just as fast. She pulled the shirt over her head and turned away. We barely spoke while getting ready. She brushed her hair. I tied my tie. She gathered her bag. I gathered my courage. She left with a curt, "See you later," and the soft click of the front door. I stood there staring at that door like it was a portal I couldn't cross. Work that day was a blur. My boss called me into his office to talk about some performance metrics. I nodded and pretended to listen, but all I could think about was the hollow ache in my chest. I used to look forward to coming home. Now I dreaded it because it meant facing the gap between us. At lunch, I sat in my car in the parking lot, picking at a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Pictures of us at the lake, arms around each other, sunlight dancing on the water. Photos from our road trip to Colorado, grinning with windblown hair. We looked so stupidly happy. I wanted to reach into those photos and warn that version of me. Don't take this for granted. Don't assume love is permanent. By the time I pulled into the driveway that evening, it was already dark. The house was lit up, but empty. She texted around 5:30, running late. Don't wait up. No apology. No heart emoji. Just a business memo. I went inside, dropped my keys on the table, and stood there for a while. The silence felt like insulation stuffed into every corner. No music. No laughter drifting from another room. No gentle, "Hi, honey." Just the mechanical tick of the kitchen clock. I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch. Flicked through channels I didn't care about. I couldn't even remember the last show we watched together. Once, we'd binge entire seasons of some dumb reality series, curled up under one blanket. Now the thought of sitting beside her felt foreign. Hours passed. I dozed off at some point. I woke up when I heard the front door open. She stepped in, dropping her bag on the floor with a tired sigh. She looked drained, dark circles under her eyes, hair messy from the wind outside. "Hey," I murmured, rubbing my eyes. She froze when she saw me awake. "Hey, why aren't you in bed?" "Couldn't sleep." She slipped off her shoes and rubbed her forehead. "I'm exhausted." "I know." We stared at each other, neither moving. I wanted to ask if she'd eaten, if she was okay, if she even wanted me to wait up, but I was afraid the answers would hurt more than the silence. She finally spoke, voice so quiet I almost missed it. "I think we need to talk." My heart did a small, panicked flip. About what? About us. The words hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. She looked away first, eyes darting toward the kitchen as though searching for escape. "I'm too tired tonight," she said. "But soon." "Okay." She picked up her bag and disappeared down the hall. I sat there staring after her, feeling like someone watching a ship sail away, knowing it was never coming back. I finished my drink and turned off the TV. The house felt cavernous, every shadow echoing louder than my footsteps. I wondered if this was what the end looked like, not screaming matches or dramatic exits, but quiet nights full of words left unsaid. When I finally crawled into bed, she was already curled up under the blanket, her back to me. I lay there listening to her soft breaths, trying not to reach out. Because the last time I tried to touch her, she'd flinched like I was a stranger. The days started bleeding into each other after that. Morning alarms, silent breakfasts, commutes in separate cars. The dance of pretending everything was normal while we circled each other like polite acquaintances. Sometimes I'd come home to find her already asleep. Sometimes she'd come home to find me pretending to read a book I wasn't really reading. Once, she brought home takeout and set it on the counter between us, as if that greasy paper bag was a peace offering. We ate in silence, barely making eye contact. It felt like two coworkers trapped in an elevator, waiting for the doors to open. One night, about a week after she'd said, "We need to talk," she came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen wiping down the counters, just for something to do with my hands. She stood in the doorway, watching me, and for a second her eyes softened. "Can we sit?" she asked. My stomach clenched, but I nodded. We went to the couch. She perched on the far cushion, clutching a throw pillow against her chest like armor. I don't know how to start this, she said finally, voice trembling. Just start anywhere. She drew a deep breath. I'm not happy. I felt the words hit me like a physical shove. My ears buzzed. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the ticking clock. I figured, I said, my voice small. Tears gathered in her eyes. She blinked them away, but one slipped down her cheek. I keep trying to fix it, but every time I look at you, it's like I'm looking at someone I used to know. And I don't know how to go back. The weight of what she said settled over me like a lead blanket. I tried to respond, but my throat felt thick. I swallowed hard. Are you saying you don't love me? She pressed her lips together, shaking her head. I don't know what I feel anymore. I care about you. I always will. But it's not the same. I stared at the coffee table between us, tracing the grain of the wood with my eyes. I remember the day we bought that table. She'd insisted on that particular one because it had character. It felt absurd how a piece of furniture could survive us while we were falling apart. She wiped her eyes. I hate hurting you. Then don't, I said before I could stop myself. The words came out sharper than I intended. She flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? My voice cracked. I've been sitting here waiting for you to come back to me, and you're already gone. Her tears came faster then. I don't want to be cruel. I'm trying to figure it out. Figure what out? I demanded. Whether I'm worth loving anymore? She dropped her head into her hands, sobbing silently. Seeing her cry used to trigger something protective in me. I'd have gathered her into my arms, whispered that we'd get through it together. Now, I just felt numb, like I was watching a stranger fall apart. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red and swollen. Maybe we should take a break. A break, I repeated flatly. What does that even mean? She sucked in a shaky breath. I mean, maybe you stay with your brother for a while. Give us space. I felt something snap inside me. I stood abruptly, my vision going blurry around the edges. No, I'm not leaving my own house. She winced. I'm not trying to kick you out. Could have fooled me. She squeezed the pillow tighter, her knuckles white. I don't know how else to breathe right now. I turned away because I couldn't look at her face another second. I felt the kitchen counter dig into my palms as I leaned against it, trying to steady my breathing. I stared at the refrigerator covered in magnets from places we'd visited together. Boston, New Orleans, the Grand Canyon. Little reminders of the people we used to be. She came up behind me. I felt her presence before she spoke. I'm sorry. For what? I asked. For not loving me? Or for finally telling the truth? Her silence was the loudest answer I'd ever heard. Eventually, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me alone with the refrigerator hum and the distant barking of a neighbor's dog. I stayed in the kitchen for a long time, just leaning there, feeling like the house was pressing in on me. Later that night, I heard her crying through the wall. The sound was muffled, but unmistakable. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dark window. For one wild second, I almost reached out for her. Almost asked her to hold me, to tell me it was going to be okay. But I didn't, because I finally understood something. You can't beg someone to stay who's already halfway out the door. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the stale air of our bedroom pressing against my skin. I could hear her soft breathing beside me, and for a moment I let myself imagine it was the old days. That any second she'd roll over, drape her arm across my chest, and murmur half-asleep words into my shoulder. But she stayed turned away, curled into herself, as if there was a wall of glass between us. I got up quietly, dressed, and slipped out of the house. It wasn't even 6 yet. The street was empty, shadows stretched long under the orange glow of streetlights. The air smelled sharp and cold. I started walking with no real destination, just moving my legs because it was the only thing I knew how to do. I ended up at a coffee shop a few blocks away. One of those places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, where everyone types on laptops and pretends they're writing a novel. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window. Outside, the world was waking up. Joggers passed by, bundled against the chill. Delivery trucks rattled down the street. People carried their paper cups like tiny shields against the day. I stared into my coffee and thought about how I'd gotten here. About how the woman who used to send me long, rambling texts just because she missed me now barely responded with single-word answers. About how we used to stay up all night talking, our laughter echoing off the walls, and now we were lucky to get through dinner without silence swallowing us whole. I remembered the first time I knew she was the one. It was a Sunday morning years ago, spring sunlight slanting through the windows. She'd been dancing in the kitchen, barefoot, hair a tangled mess, singing off-key to an old Maroon 5 song. She caught me staring and blushed, then laughed and said, "God, you look at me like you're already writing your vows." She wasn't wrong. In that moment, I'd imagined an entire future with her. Kids, holidays, gray hair and shared inside jokes. I'd pictured us growing old together, still dancing in the kitchen even when our knees gave out. And now, we couldn't even look each other in the eyes. When I finally made it home, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up right away. I stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure how to exist in my own house. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she echoed. Her thumb kept moving on the screen. "How was work yesterday?" "It was fine." "That's good." She looked up then, and for a split second, I saw how exhausted she was. Not just physically, but like her soul was running on fumes. "I meant what I said last night," she murmured. "I think we should take a break." I clenched my jaw. "And I meant what I said. I'm not leaving my house." "It's not about the house, Alex." Her voice wavered. "It's about us needing space. I feel like I can't breathe." "Do you love someone else?" The question slipped out before I could catch it. She stared at me, shocked. "No. God, no. It's not about someone else. I don't even know who I am anymore. And I can't figure it out while I'm constantly pretending everything's okay." I dropped into the armchair across from her, suddenly drained. "So what? We just pause our marriage?" "I don't know," she said, tears gathering. "I just know I can't keep living like this." Silence stretched between us, thick as tar. I couldn't remember a time when we didn't know what to say to each other. Now, every word felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. "Maybe I'll go stay with Eric," I mumbled finally. Her eyes snapped up. "You don't have to do that." "Don't I?" I shot back. "Because if you're asking for space, you clearly don't want me here." She opened her mouth, closed it again, and just shook her head helplessly. I stood up and went into the bedroom. Started pulling a few things out of the dresser. A couple of shirts, jeans, socks, my phone charger. She followed me in, hovering by the door. "You don't have to leave," she whispered. I kept folding clothes. "I can't stay here pretending we're fine. Not when you're looking at me like I'm a piece of furniture in your way." "That's not fair," she whispered. "You know I love you. I'm just lost." I turned, meeting her eyes. "I've been lost for a long time. The difference is, I've been waiting for you to find me." She burst into quiet sobs, covering her mouth like she was embarrassed by the sound. I stood there holding a half-folded T-shirt, feeling like I'd aged 10 years and 10 seconds. Eventually, I zipped the small duffel bag and set it by the door. She watched me the whole time, arms crossed over her chest, tears rolling silently. Neither of us said goodbye. I walked out of the apartment feeling like I just stepped off a cliff into open air. Eric didn't even ask questions when I showed up at his door with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder. He just stepped aside and said, "Guest room's yours. Beer's in the fridge." That's the thing about friends like Eric. They don't need the whole speech. They can look at the shape of your face and know something broke inside you. The guest room smelled faintly like old laundry and cedar. The bed was stiff. The sheets were mismatched. But it felt like a safer place than my own home. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the floor. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I typed, "I'm fine," and then deleted it. Typed, "I miss you," and deleted that, too. Finally, I put the phone face down and didn't answer. Eric came in carrying 2 bottles of beer. He handed me one without a word. He sat in the chair across from me, cracked open his own bottle, and took a long drink. "Want to talk about it?" he asked eventually. "Not really." He nodded. "Cool." We sat there in silence, sipping beers in the dim lamplight. It wasn't awkward. It was just quiet. A better quiet than the one I'd been drowning in for months. After a while, Eric leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You want my opinion?" I didn't, but I shrugged. "Sure. She's been gone for a while, man." The words punched me in the gut. "I know," I whispered. "I mean, physically she's there. But emotionally? Nah. She checked out ages ago. You've been fighting for 2 people. That's why you're tired all the damn time." I stared at him, throat tight. He went on, softer now. "You're not a bad husband, Alex. You're just the only one trying. And that's not how marriage works. It takes 2. A lump formed in my chest. I hated how right he was. He finished his beer and stood. "Anyway, you want pizza?" "I'm starving." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah, sure." We ordered a large pepperoni, ate it sitting on the couch while a game played on mute in the background. It felt good to chew, to taste food again, even if I barely registered the flavor. That night, I lay in Eric's guest bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed again around midnight. I can't sleep. I read it 3 times, as if the letters might rearrange into something else. Then another text came. I miss you. I squeezed my eyes shut, my thumb trembling over the screen. But I didn't reply. I woke up the next morning with my heart pounding, half expecting her beside me, hair spilling across the pillow. But the bed was empty, the room silent except for the hum of Eric's fridge in the next room. I got up, showered, dressed in the same jeans from the day before. Eric was already up, flipping pancakes like he'd been practicing for years. "Thought you could use a real breakfast," he said. I smiled gratefully. "Thanks, man." We ate at the kitchen counter. It felt almost normal. The way things used to feel before life turned into a silent war zone. Around 9, my phone buzzed again. Can we meet today? Please." I stared at it, a sick swirl in my stomach. Eric saw my face. "You don't owe her anything right now, man." "I know. Doesn't mean you won't go," he said gently. I wiped my mouth with a napkin. "I need to hear what she has to say." Eric nodded, though his eyes were wary. "Okay, just don't let her pull you back in because you feel guilty. That's how you end up right back where you started." I left around noon, driving through streets that looked the same but felt completely foreign. Every traffic light seemed to hang forever, casting red reflections across the dashboard. When I pulled up outside our apartment building, my chest felt tight. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to turn the car around and keep driving. But eventually, I climbed out and went upstairs. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been waiting with her ear pressed to the wood. Her eyes were red and swollen. She wore an old hoodie I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, the one with the tiny hole near the pocket. "Hi," she whispered. "Hey, come in." I hesitated, then stepped inside. The place smelled the same. Vanilla candles, faint detergent, something floral from the soap she used. But it felt different, like a stage set where the actors had forgotten their lines. She sat on the couch. I stayed standing. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "For everything. For how cold I've been. For pushing you away." I waited, arms crossed, unsure what to say. "I've been so overwhelmed, Alex. Work life. I just felt like I couldn't breathe. And you kept trying to fix it. And that made me feel even worse because I couldn't give you what you wanted." "I just wanted you," I said quietly. "I know." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "And I wanted to want you the way I used to. But I didn't. And that terrified me." The room seemed to shrink around us. "So what now?" I asked. She looked down at her hands. "I don't know. Do you love me?" Her silence was an answer in itself, and it felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. The silence that followed felt endless. I could hear the low hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock above the TV. Outside, someone's car alarm chirped once and fell silent. I looked at her, trying to memorize every detail. The way her hair fell over one eye, the little wrinkle between her brows that only showed up when she was anxious, the chipped blue nail polish on her fingers. I knew in that moment that part of me would always love her, no matter how much I tried not to. But loving her and staying with her were suddenly 2 different things. She finally spoke, her voice so small it barely reached me. "I don't know how to get back to the way we were." I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "Maybe we can't." Her eyes filled again. "So, what? We just throw away all these years?" I let out a shaky breath. "We're not throwing them away. We live them. They're real. But living in the past doesn't fix the present." She rubbed her palms over her thighs like she was trying to wipe something off. "I don't want to lose you. You already have." Her face crumpled. She doubled over, pressing her hands to her face, sobs racking her shoulders. I stared at her, wanting so badly to go to her, to hold her the way I used to when life hurt. But I stayed where I was. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I swear I didn't mean to hurt you." I blinked back tears of my own. "I know you didn't. But it doesn't change that you did." She shook her head, trying to catch her breath. "I'm scared. I don't know who I am without you." I sank into the armchair, exhausted. "I don't know who I am with you anymore." For a long while, we both just sat there crying quietly. Then she wiped her eyes and said, "What happens now?" I stared at my hands, feeling older than I'd ever felt in my life. "I think I need to let you go." Her lips trembled. "Don't say that." "I have to." She reached for me, but I gently pulled my hand away. "Please don't," I whispered. "I can't keep hoping for something that's gone." She covered her mouth like she was trying to keep from screaming. "Maybe we'll be friends one day," I said, voice trembling. "But not now. Not yet." "Alex," her voice cracked around my name. I shook my head, tears spilling over. "I love you. But I love me too. And I can't keep losing myself trying to save something that doesn't exist anymore." She sobbed harder, folding into herself. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to rewind time to the days when we were still laughing on road trips and kissing in grocery store aisles. But there was no going back. Eventually, I stood up. "I'll come back in a few days for my stuff." She nodded, unable to speak. I left the apartment, my chest feeling like it was being crushed in a vice. I made it down the hallway before the tears came in a hot, unstoppable wave. I leaned against the cool wall, trying to breathe. When I finally reached the car, I sat behind the wheel and stared at the steering column. My phone buzzed with another message from her. "I still love you." I stared at it for a long time. Then I locked my phone and dropped it on the passenger seat. I started the car and drove away. I crashed at Eric's for another week. He never pried. He'd leave me alone when I needed it, or drag me out to shoot pool or grab burgers when he thought I looked like I was drowning. One night, a few days after I left the apartment, we sat in his garage, drinking beers under the yellow glow of a single bulb. It smelled like sawdust and motor oil. "You ever think you'll go back?" he asked. I stared into my bottle. "I don't know. I keep waiting to feel this big, pull to fix it. But mostly, I just feel tired." "That's because you've been carrying the weight for both of you," he said. "And now you're finally setting it down." I wiped my eyes with the back of my wrist. "It just sucks, man. How fast it all fell apart." He shrugged. "It didn't fall apart fast. It's been dying in slow motion. You just finally stopped pretending." I couldn't argue with that. Later that night, lying in Eric's spare room, I scrolled through old photos on my phone again. Us on the Ferris wheel in Santa Monica, laughing so hard her head was thrown back. Her sitting cross-legged on the floor painting her toenails while singing along to the radio. I realized I wasn't just grieving her. I was grieving the man I used to be with her. The man who believed forever was something you could hold on to if you just tried hard enough. I closed my eyes, feeling strangely calm. Maybe it was time to stop fighting for something that didn't exist anymore. It took me a few weeks to find a place. Nothing fancy, a small one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store on the edge of town. The paint was chipped in spots, the floors creaked like they were telling secrets, and the bathroom sink leaked if you turned the faucet too hard. But it was mine. I moved in on a gray Saturday morning, hauling boxes up narrow stairs that smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Eric helped me carry a battered couch and a cheap IKEA table. We didn't talk much during the move. He just gave me a solid slap on the back when we were done and said, "New beginnings, man." Once he left, I stood alone in the middle of the living room. Light streamed in through a single window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I felt weightless and heavy all at once. I sat on the floor for a long time, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. One of them was full of old photos I'd accidentally brought with me from the apartment. Us at weddings. Us on beaches. Us in winter coats, noses red from the cold. I closed the box and shoved it into the back of the closet. The first night there, I lay in a strange bed and listened to the hum of traffic outside. The sheets smelled like the plastic packaging they came in. Everything was unfamiliar. But in that emptiness, there was also a quiet sort of peace. No tension vibrating through the walls. No silence loaded with unsaid accusations. No pretending. Just me. A month went by. Then another. I got into a routine. Work, the gym, dinners by myself. I learned how to cook for one. Started reading books I'd forgotten I owned. Went for long walks just to tire myself out enough to sleep. Sometimes, I still woke up reaching for her. Habit is a stubborn thing. But every time, my hand fell on cool sheets instead of warm skin, and I'd remind myself that leaving wasn't just an ending. It was the start of something I couldn't quite name yet. One Saturday morning, I stopped at a cafe near my new place. I was waiting for my coffee when I felt someone step up behind me. "Alex." I turned, and there she was. She looked different. Smaller somehow. Her hair shorter. Eyes a little sadder. She wore a pale gray coat and no makeup, like she couldn't be bothered. "Hey," I said, surprised at how calm I felt. "Hey," she said, a soft, cautious smile tugging at her lips. "You look good." "Thanks. So do you." She fiddled with the strap of her purse. "I've been meaning to reach out." I nodded. "I know." A beat passed between us. People bustled around, conversations floating through the cafe like static. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she said finally. For everything. For the way I handled it. For how I treated you. I know you're sorry, I said gently. I thought I was doing you a favor by pushing you away. I thought I was sparing you. But I was just scared. I know, I repeated. Her eyes shimmered. Do you ever think about us? I paused, really considering it. I think about who we were. I don't think about going back. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. I miss you. I nodded. I miss who we were, too. But we're not those people anymore. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Do you think we could at least talk sometimes? Maybe. Be friends. I felt a pang, deep and bittersweet. Maybe, I said. Someday. But not yet. She nodded, her chin trembling. Okay. My name was called at the counter. I stepped forward, grabbed my coffee. When I turned back, she was still standing there, looking small and uncertain. Take care of yourself, I said. You too, she whispered. I walked past her, out into the crisp morning air. Sunlight glared off the windshields lining the street. A breeze blew the scent of roasted coffee and exhaust. I took a sip of my drink, feeling the heat spread through my chest. And for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. Not ecstatic. Not crushed. Just okay. Because I realized leaving wasn't about punishing her or proving a point. It was about choosing myself. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't holding on. It's letting go.